Hello friends. Welcome to the Eastern Front channel. Today we will talk with you about the memoirs of Friedrich Paulus adjutant, Arno von Lenski, who fought with Paulus until he was captured in 1943. The weather on the December 12th was frosty, and dawn had yet to break when I arrived at the airstrip. The commandant was restlessly awaiting the return of the aircraft that had taken off at 4 a.m. Then at last, when it had become light, one of them landed. Where were the other two? The pilot reported that the three aircraft had encountered hefty flak shortly after leaving the Cauldron. Apparently, the two missing Junkers 52s had been shot down. This was no good omen for me, nor for the three regimental commanders who were supposed to fly with me. But after shaking hands with the commandant, we hurried to the three waiting Heinkel 111s. We climbed into two different machines. Clambering over sacks and boxes of foodstuffs, I wriggled into the seat behind the pilots next to the radio operator. Immediately after taking off, the aircraft climbed steeply into the sky. The altimeter soon showed 4,000 meters, then we began to fly east. We crossed the Don far to the south of Nizhny Cherskaya. Under us the sunshine glistened on the Kalmuk steppe. Above us smiled a cloud-free blue sky. I recalled my first flight, which took me to Veneza in the summer, also in the finest weather. Then too I scanned the sky with my eyes peeled for Soviet fighters, but then there had been German fighters in the sky. Now there was no fighter protection and the sky was open to the Soviet Yaks plane. What should I do if enemy fighters attack? I asked the pilot in front of me. He laughed. Stay sitting quietly, Colonel. We'll do everything ourselves, he shouted back over the sound of the engines. The youngster annoyed me a little, for I had no parachute. And if we get hit, I shouted forwards. Then we are wiped out, he answered at the same volume but with the greatest calm, as if he was dealing with the most natural thing in the world. He pointed downwards. There is the Red Army position. I recognized vehicles in a settlement, tanks, Colonel. Like a tour guide he explained everything that appeared in our view. Puffs of cloud, once near, once further off, once over us, once under us showed that the flak had opened fire. But my guide was not disturbed by his loud presentation. Was he trying to help me to overcome my uneasy feeling, or even more my anxiety? I wondered about this young officer who had to fly this death-surrounded stretch several times a day. He turned to me with his smiling face. We have made it, Colonel, down there is Pitomnik. I really felt relieved. Helplessly watching the enemy shells without being able to avoid them was an unpleasant feeling. The machine glided down, crossing over the airstrip several times. This way I got the first impression of what was happening here. The place was overflowing with crashed aircraft and destroyed vehicles, there a Condor, here a Focke-Wulf. Among the wrecks were several Junkers 52s and Heinkel 111s, the work of the Red bombers and fighters. The two other aircraft kept close to us. My pilot, who had been the quietest on the way, pressed for haste. The supply items were quickly unloaded, then came the return freight, wounded men crawling out of holes in the earth, creeping and hobbling or carried on stretchers. An officer and some soldiers, apparently a control team, braced themselves against the group of humans trying to force their way onto the aircraft. They were only flown out if they had a chit from the army doctors. Alarm was sounded in this confusion, Soviet bombers at a great height. For a moment everyone thought of the approaching danger and sought cover as well as they could. I went straight into the bunker of the Airfield commander as the bombs started exploding. The ground shook, the strong planks shivered, earth trickled through the wooden roof and onto the table standing in front of us. There were several dozen hits, then it seemed to be over. There is little to celebrate here, I said to a Luftwaffe second lieutenant who belonged to the Airfield commander's staff. Do you get such visits often? We are used to them, Colonel. There is hardly an hour during the day that Ivan leaves us undisturbed. As long as there are no losses, it is not too bad. The airman had not yet completed this sentence when the call for help came. Medic, medic. Are there doctors nearby? I asked concernedly. There are some roomy medical tents on the edge of the field. All badly wounded are brought here on the orders of the army to be flown out by the supply machines. The army doctor, Dr. General Professor Dr. Rinaldi, is stationed here. He is responsible for the loading of the wounded. In fact, he is almost powerless, as so many lightly wounded come here. They hide themselves in unused trenches and bunkers and are the first on the spot, and ruthlessly drag the badly wounded away. Some manage to smuggle themselves aboard despite the controls. We often have to empty the aircraft again to find room for the badly wounded. The paintbrush of a Holland Bruegel or the eloquence of a Dante would be necessary to illustrate the cruel scenes that I have experienced here in the last 10 days. We went up out of the shelter. Our 3 Heinkel 111s had already started up for the return flight. Meanwhile, it had become clear to me why the pilots were in so much of a hurry to leave Pitomnik again. Destruction and death lurked in the air. Coming to meet me were 2 older officers. It appeared that they were the regimental commanders who had left Morozovsk at 4 a.m. and had been awaiting my arrival in a bunker. Talking to them, I discovered that they were former officers who in peacetime worked in local district headquarters or on the staff of higher staff. They had asked the army staff about their role, but no one could tell them where they had to report. I telephoned Schmidt, who had ordered their flight. He referred me to the adjutant of the 8th Corps, from whom the request had come. But the latter told me in reply to my call that all posts were taken in the 8th Corps. He had never requested any such replacements. This was a strong blow, letting old commanders be flown into this precarious situation unnecessarily. What should I do? They could only fly out again on Schmidt's orders. I was not authorized to give such a solution, but I wanted to get Paulus to approve the flight. I therefore invited these 2 gentlemen to await a further decision at the airport. A car took me to the headquarters near Gumrak station. Already 4 weeks previously I had driven along this road. Then supply vehicles were rolling day and night to Stalingrad, signs gave clear directions, military police regulated the traffic. Now the same road had a completely different aspect. Hollow-cheeked figures with heads wrapped in blood-soaked bandages and feet bound in cloths tottered along. The road signs had long since been burnt, the military police had vanished. Now shot-up vehicles and discarded helmets, gas masks and weapons marked the road from Pitomnik to Stalingrad. Ghostly skeletons of fallen horses protruded from their thin covering of snow, showing where hungry soldiers had hacked the flesh off them with hatchets. A hectic, hyper-nervous atmosphere reigned at army headquarters. I wanted first to arrange the flight out for the regimental commanders and so went to Schmidt. He categorically refused. In this situation we cannot let any officer fly out unless he is severely wounded, he countered. I had made a tactical mistake that was almost impossible to correct. General Paulus would certainly have approved my proposal. From experience, however, I knew he would never countermand a decision made by Schmidt. Nevertheless, I decided, after a short reflection, to see the commander-in-chief and ask about the return flight of the regimental commanders. I reported to Paulus and made my request. Who asked for these officers? In Morozovsk, Colonel Bader gave me a radio message signed by Schmidt, General. All corps adjutants have confirmed that they have not asked for any regimental commanders. I have been unable to establish in my short time here who made this nonsense. Then Schmidt should give the order to have them flown out of the Cauldron. That is why I went straight to him. Nevertheless, Schmidt refused. I don't regard this as being correct. Hoff's relief army has set off today. Let us wait until contact has been made with us, then we will place all 3 men back in the commander reserve. Until then, they will be placed at the disposal of the 8th Corps. That was how the decision about these old officers was made. Uselessly they sat with the 8th Corps and were finally sent to the slaughter with thousands of others in the Cauldron. This was only a small part of Arno von Lenski's memories. I am waiting for your discussions in the comments. Also, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. See you all soon for now.